Okay, now I've got 15 minutes, and I will be told to shut up after 15 minutes. But if you have anything in your mind, any questions or so forth, I have a couple of things I'd like to talk about, but first we're going to see what you want to talk about. Anything at all?
I have a two-part question.
A two-part question?
Two-part.
All right.
First of all, have you ever performed a wedding that you thought was a bad idea? And have you ever performed a funeral which you thought was a good idea?
This sounds like, can you top this or something? Wow. I'll put it this way. I've performed a lot of weddings, and you get different feelings. I mean, each couple is different. And there are some couples that I really was a little bit fearful about, and they proved me wrong. After 30, 40 years, they're still married. And I had a couple couples, I've had couples and I thought, this is the ideal situation, and they're not married. I've given up trying to predict. I really cannot predict. This much I do sense though, and maybe you sense the same thing, that generally speaking, I'm not against young people. I like young people. We need good young people, but the generations coming after us dinosaurs, the younger generations don't seem to have the same sense of permanent commitment that we grew up with. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, when they come to fill out the paperwork, I was visiting this afternoon with a couple that I married some years ago, and they were talking about filling out the paperwork. They answer all the questions right. Do you enter a marriage that can be dissolved only by the death of either party? Oh, yes. Will you be faithful to each other forever? Yes. I mean, there are stars in their eyes. They're in love. They give all the right answers. But then when something happens, it isn't there. If things get tough, they decide I don't have to stay around. That's that certain lack of commitment there that I don't know how to put my finger on it, but I think we're just dealing with it. It's not only marriage. I think the same thing is true with the religious life. I think the reason we have fewer and fewer priests is there are fewer and fewer people who want to make a lifetime commitment to something. You know? I may be wrong on that. But the answer to your question, Frank, is I've given up trying to predict. They ever think that burying someone was a good thing? Not in the sense I want to get rid of somebody. But in another sense, every time I bury someone I think is good. Good for them, not for the people who are left behind. My heart goes out to the families and the friends left behind. But I really don't feel too bad for the person that we're burying, because I honestly, God, believe that they're in the hands of the Lord. And they're better off than we are. Better off than we are. We here in Tucson, we buried 2 priests yesterday. Monsignor Carrillo and Monsignor Wagner. Both very good friends of mine. Well, they're better off than I am. You know, they got the answers, I don't. I've always said to people who are close to dying, if you get there and you can come back and tell me what's going on, please tell me. Nobody comes back. Nobody, even though they promise they will, they never come back and tell me. But so I don't know if that answers your question or not. I've never buried anyone saying, "Oh, good riddance" or anything like that.
Father?
Yes.
That's a great segue to my question.
Yes.
I had a good friend of ours, that proclaimed recently about that they were supporting assisted suicide and for terminally ill. And you were just talking about burying, I know one of those priests was terminally ill. What should I think about that? How do I...
About assisted suicide?
Assisted suicide for the terminally ill.
Yeah. We don't believe in it because we believe that the whole business of life and death is God's work and God's decision. And we're not going to interfere with that. we believe in palliative care. I mean, where people are suffering in the last days or weeks, whatever it is, to make them as comfortable as we can. That's why they have hospice care, to make people as comfortable as they can for that transition. To make it happen, no. The church does not believe in assisted suicide. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's what the church says.
Thank you.
Okay. What else comes to your mind? Yes.
Hi. This is a totally different topic, but, our world is so full, well, this country is so full of political anger and animosity, and it's just so ugly and awful. I've never gone 55. I've never seen it like this before. I'm not that old, but I wanted to know what the church's policy is on preaching, on priests giving sermons, and what the stance is. Are priests in the Catholic Church allowed to get into political things and recommend certain candidates or certain bills?
Okay. Good question.
I wanted to know what the church's policy is.
Okay.
If that's allowed or not.
Our president, by the way, just changed that. I'm not sure that that's in accord with church policy, but he just opened the doors, saying that religious congregations could preach politics. You see, we've never been, the rule has always been, this is law up until now, is that if we ever preached partisan politics or I recommended a particular candidate, we were in danger of losing our federal tax exemption. So we're not allowed to touch it, okay? Now, the president just said he's easing that law so that we can do it. Even if we could, I don't want to. But here's the problem I think that most of us have, is that we make social justice, which is a very Christian thing, the same as politics, and it's not the same. I'm supposed to preach justice. I'm not supposed to preach partisan politics, and I won't. But many of the justice questions have to do with politics, because the decisions that are made at the city, state, and national level are affecting lives in very real ways. And if something is being legislated that is unjust, we need to say we don't believe in that. So we're supposed to preach about the issues, but not about anything partisan. But that's a hard distinction for some people to make. Some people say as soon as you mention anything at all that's a part of a political discussion, you're talking politics. That's not true. That's not true. I can talk to you about hunger in the world and tell you what the church says about that. That's not political. I can talk to you about immigration reform, and you say, immediately says political. No, it isn't political. It's a justice issue. All right? You see the distinction that is made? It's hard to see it sometimes. Am I clear at all? Yes.
I just want to say something in addition to the tax issue. I thought there was something in the Catholic Church, in our rules or our laws that prohibit that. So I guess I was thinking.
Yeah, well, the church doesn't have any laws prohibiting it, except the church's directions to priests and to people when it comes to elections and things is we are obliged morally to support the candidate that reflects more of our own values as Christians. Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to find one that reflects them all, So it's a choice between the person who reflects best the values that we have as Christians. That's just a recommendation on the part of, that's called Faithful Citizenship document that the American bishops issued some years ago. Okay, anything else? I have a couple ideas, but what I'd like to talk to you about? I'm going to ask you this. Is there anyone here who finds forgiveness to be difficult? That's something I'd like to talk about. Is there anyone here who wonders what purpose he has in his or her life? I'd like to talk about that too. We can't talk about it all now, because I'm going to get shut off here in a few minutes. Anything else before we go into any? Yes.
As Christians, this kind of ties into the gospel. As Christians, is our faith in Jesus, does that save us, that faith alone, or is more expected of us?
All right. More is expected of us. Basically, we are saved by our faith in Jesus, but if it's true faith, it leads us to action. And it doesn't tell you what kind of action, but it leads us to action. It leads us to taking whatever action we need to become the loving, caring people that Jesus calls us to be. So in order to say, all right, Jesus, I believe in you, and I don't care about anybody else, that's not faith. That gets us nowhere. If we don't care about anybody else, don't say we believe in Jesus. It just doesn't work that way. If I believe in Jesus, I'm going to try, imperfectly because I'm a human being, I'm going to try my best to become more and more of the person he calls me to be. That's to become a more loving, caring person than I am. That's a lifetime project, believe me. But that's the road I want us to be on and to stay on. But it's like, it's like faith without works isn't going to work. St. James puts that in his epistle. He says, you show me your faith and I'll show you the works that come from my faith. This is the old Catholic Lutheran discussion, by the way. Are we saved by faith or by works? That discussion is no longer there. We've come to agree that it's faith leading to works. Does that make sense to you? Does that answer your question? Oh, you got good questions, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Over here.
Oh, over here, yes.
I got a question.
Yes.
In today's gospel, Jesus says that he is the gatekeeper, and all those who believe in him can go to heaven. Just those who believe in Jesus?
That's a very good question. You know what? And you know what? I can't answer it. I wish I could. I wish I could, because Jesus says over and over again in the Gospels, if you believe in me, you live forever, right? Over and over again he tells us. He promises us eternal life for what? For believing in him. If a person believes in me, even though he dies, he will live forever. Thank you, Lord. But then immediately we say, what about a person who doesn't believe in you? What happens to them? I don't know. I'm not God. I leave it to God. That's something he will definitely take care of. I can't answer that question. I personally believe that heaven is for everybody. And our church also teaches that people who have never even heard of Jesus, but who are living their lives in accord with his values, are saved people, even though they've never heard of Jesus. So that's sort of a type of faith, but it's not a verbal faith of any kind, or an intellectual type of faith. But the church in its documents definitely speaks about the salvation of Christians, Jews, atheists, agnostics, Mohammedans, Islam, everyone you can, and people with no religion whatsoever. That everybody is born into this world to live forever. It all depends on how each individual responds to what they believe is right. What they believe is right and correct. And I can't say much more than that, because I sure have no answer to the question. Anything else? We never got to forgiveness yet. Anything else? Yes.
Since you're talking about life forever, who believe in Christ, how does the church look at reincarnation?
We don't teach reincarnation. truth of the matter is, you see, the catechisms that we learned try to say something about afterlife. Too late?
No.
I have to use my watch, use my clock. They say, try to say something about what happens when a person dies. And it goes something like this. The soul leaves a person's body. Remember that? Appears before Jesus for a particular judgment. And then depending on how that judgment goes, they go immediately into heaven, immediately to a much warmer climate. Or since most of us are not totally good or totally bad, most of us end up in a place called purgatory to get scrubbed up a little bit before we enter heaven. Isn't that what we're told? It all may be true. I don't know. Neither does the church. It's a theory. It's a theory. Reincarnation is based basically on the same principle, though, is that we die imperfect and we still need further purification. I mean, the idea is there, but the church does not believe that we actually come back and live another life. But the idea of further purification is the same, I think. Time? Well, I still want to talk to you about forgiveness. We'll do that another time. And we'll talk, I need to talk to you about a purposeful life too. I mean, we got a sense of meaning. I think that's important. I mean, those things are important to me. And I always figure, well, if it's important to me, it's probably important to you too. Okay, so we'll hit that another time. 15 minutes is our rule. Has it been 15? 17, I'm sorry.